Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is Kid at BloodyElbow.com, joined by Zane Simon and Connor Rubish to talk about not one but two UFC fight cards that some people may or may not care about. We've got Mir versus Duffee coming out of San Diego on Wednesday night, and then we've got Bisping versus Leites coming out of Glasgow, Scotland on Saturday afternoon, North American time. So we're going to rush through all these fights and get you all prepared for everything you need to know for Wednesday and Saturday so that you can bet responsibly, because that's the only way to do it. Zane, thoughts on the two cards?
It's filler. I mean, the UFC has to get all their fighters fight somehow, and they've got 1/6 of their roster fighting in these 2 weeks.
So they're getting bills paid. They're getting
Yep.
fighters busy, and we didn't do a post-fight show on Wonder Boy versus Ellenberger, but I got to say, Wonder Boy looked pretty damn good and very entertaining with the hook kicks and everything else. But Connor, your thoughts on the upcoming week of fights?
Yeah, it becomes easier and easier to be okay with these cards the more familiar I become with these fighters. Like it was a very rough period during the UFC when they were picking up tons and tons of new guys you never heard of. Once you get a chance to see them once or twice in the UFC, you're like, okay, that's a prospect, that's not a prospect. At least you kind of, you know what I mean? It's better to
Yeah.
just know what you're seeing. And so, these are acceptable fight night cards.
Yeah, this looked like fun. So let's get right to it. First up, we've got Mir versus Duffee Wednesday night in San Diego. It's going to be on Fox Sports 1 with two fights on Fight Pass. First up on Fight Pass, welterweight Andrew Craig and Lyman Good, a guy that all-time MMA fans will remember from other promotions. Zane, you want to go first?
Sure. Good. Craig's not very good yet. I mean, Craig has a puncher's chance. He's shown the ability to have like the power to surprise people, and Good stands really stiff and enters on straight lines. But Good should be the better athlete, the more consistent boxer, and the better wrestler and grappler.
All right. And Connor, do you disagree?
Well, it may be notable that Craig is coming down to welterweight for the first time in his career, so that size advantage could help him against Good, who's kind of a passive fighter in a lot of ways. But, like technically speaking, Craig's got a shot here. I think he's got a decent shot, in fact, but I just don't think he's consistent. Like he lands the punch, it's like, oh wow, he can really crack, and he chose that shot well, but then half the time he just doesn't land the punch. So I got to go with Good.
All right, and the odds makers like Good as well. They've got him favored from minus 260 all the way up to minus 290. Once again, we're getting our odds from OddsShark, the SBN betting partner. And Andrew Craig is the underdog at plus 210 all the way up to plus 241. And that brings us to the other Fight Pass card, Kevin Casey versus Ildemar Alcantara at middleweight. Definitely the lesser of the Alcantara brothers, although he's the bigger one. Connor, you can go first.
I got to go with Alcantara just strictly because I know he can go for 3 rounds, and I kind of feel like I know Kevin Casey can't. So Kevin Casey's pretty dangerous for that first round, but Alcantara's never. I don't think he's ever been knocked out. He's very difficult to finish, and he's very resilient. His fights are often boring, but they're boring because they go for 15 minutes almost every time.
I see. And Zane?
Yeah, I got to go with Alcantara. More importantly, he has been knocked out a couple times, but he's never been submitted.
That's
And that's the thing. He's a really, he's not an easy guy to submit. And if Casey can't get an early submission, I think Alcantara takes it.
He hasn't been knocked out since 2009, and he's fought
Yeah,
like 20 times since then.
yeah. He's not got a bad chin. That wasn't
No.
to suggest, but it's the submission. Like Casey's not a great knockout artist as much as he is a real quick submission threat.
And if you bet the venal sin of gambling, if that's your thing, and you listen to our panel and believe what they say, this might be an opportunity, as was the last one, because Casey's favored, although not enormously, minus 111 all the way up to minus 130. Alcantara is the underdog at plus 100 all the way up to plus 105, so not a huge range. I bet nobody is betting on that fight, is what I bet.
Just say that, Nate.
Well, just a guess. But and just look at those numbers. They look like they were preset and they haven't moved. And now we come to the Fox Sports 1 preliminary card, which is 4 fights. Welterweights Igor Awayo versus Sean Strickland. Zane, I believe it's your turn.
Strickland, Arajo is not good. Basically, I mean Strickland, unless he just totally can't figure it out.
Arajo no bueno. Connor, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know about Strickland, man. It kind of feels like he should win this fight. He's younger, he's got room to develop, he's cleaner technically, but he does just kind of wander through some of his fights where he's just like, okay, I'm picking off your punches, I'm not getting hit very much, but he's not doing anything to win. So Arajo's got a chance here, but yeah, I guess I'll go with Strickland, but it's not really. It's not a very good fight, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I'll say this: Strickland should be at 185. That's the big takeaway. His athletic gifts were a lot more special at 185. At 170, there are like 100 guys like him at 170 pounds.
Yeah.
And however, he's heavily favored this week at minus 343 all the way up to minus 370, and Araujo is the underdog at plus 265 all the way up to plus 300, and that brings us to Hanayaya versus Masanori Kanehari at bantamweight, and I believe it's Connor's turn.
I think this is one that's worth talking about. There's
How that?
Zane approves. There are a lot of factors in this fight that could make this a potential fight of the night. It should be really fun. We have two guys who are sort of grappling specialists, so that's kind of changing for Kanehara as he continues to develop. But Yaya, very well known for being the slick guard passer, good top control, good submission game. He's willing to throw down on the feet, as he showed in his fight with Johnny Bedford, but at times, that's not necessarily in his favor. He gets a little wild. He's not a very clean striker. For his part, Kanehara has turned into a cleaner and cleaner striker as he's continued to develop and improve. He's not entirely consistent, but he seems to have some pretty significant power on the feet, and he's pretty good at sneaking in those punches in transitions, little moments, little openings. The punch with which he hurt Caceres in the first round of their fight was really nicely placed. And so if you leave yourself open and you go after Kanehara on the feet, then he can crack you. He's not as technical as Yaya on the ground. He kind of leaves some openings. He does some weird iffy stuff. He'll like throw his head into guillotines and stuff from guard. But honestly, I don't think Yaya is as much of a submission threat as he's often been sold as. I remember Yaya going for the arm-in guillotine on Johnny Bedford in their last fight and just like cranking and yanking on it like it was a no-arm guillotine. And for a jiu-jitsu black belt, you think he'd know how to finish it, and he just kind of didn't. And then when he fought Tom Niinamaki, Niinamaki just sliced through his guard, controlled him completely and utterly. He's tricky, but he's not really a very consistently effective grappler. So this one seems like an even fight, but I think I have to go with Kanehara. I think he's a better finisher, and I think that Yaya is potentially prone to being knocked out.
And Zane, your take?
Yeah, I mean, another thing at play here is that Kanehara, I'm definitely going with Kanehara. He hasn't been submitted for years now. I mean, we're going all the way back to, 2005 in ZST for his last submission. Really what he's been susceptible to is being knocked out by much better strikers and athletes. Really, power strikers like Marlon Sando or Rasul Mirzaev. These are, guys who can really be dynamic power strikers, and Yaya's not that guy. Yaya can throw some good, he can throw some big winging punches, but they're not the kind of thing that's going to consistently find anyone's chin or surprise them. He might catch somebody early once and hurt them, but following up is going to be a big challenge. Kanehara's striking has looked a lot better lately. He's got some real power. And it's just one of those things where it's like, I think he can survive enough on the ground, especially since Yaya is really susceptible to just holding a position and then not doing anything. I think Kanehara is the kind of guy where he can survive those kind of those kind of grappling exchanges and then be the better striker. And at root, I mean, it's weird because these are both guys who have only lost recently to potential top 10, top 20 talents, and yet are and have beat some of the best. I mean, you're talking Yaya beat Mike Brown and Eddie Wineland and Yoshiro Maeda and Mark Hominick, and Kanehara beat Norifumi Yamamoto and Michihiro Omagawa and Chan Sung Jung. These guys have been super legit. But Yaya seems like the kind of guy who could still lose to Chase Beebe. Like, that's the difference, is he's got that level of inconsistency, whereas Kanahara seems more like he's actually really improved over time.
All right, and the odds makers have no idea what to make of this fight. They've got it nearly dead even. Kanahara is a minus 107 all the way up to, well, plus 100 all the way up to minus 115, and Yaya is at minus 107 to minus 120. So I guess Yaya is barely favored by the odds makers, but this one is a fun one. I'm looking forward to this one. I think Yaya is probably a little bit past his prime, but still fun to watch, and Kanahara I'm a big fan of. And that brings us to women's bantamweight, Jessica Andrade versus Sarah Moras. Zane, it's your turn.
All right, I'm taking Andrade. She's the better athlete, the better technician everywhere. Morris seems like somebody who's kind of trying to find fitness and form while in the UFC, and that's a really difficult task. Andrade ran up against a really legit grappler last time out, and I don't think she expected that at all, and that was really bad for her. But Morris isn't nearly as good a grappler as Renault, so
And Connor, your pick?
Same pick. Got to go with Andrade.
All right, and the odds makers, they like Andrade as well. She's favored from minus 325 all the way up to minus 350, and Ross is the underdog at plus 250 all the way up to plus 285, and that brings us to Sam Cecilia and Yatsen Meza at featherweight, headlining the prelim card. And Connor, you can talk first.
I felt bad for being so hard on Yeltsin Meza in his last fight when he really showed why he's been able to compete at this level, even when he sometimes seems like so incredibly open to being hit and so without options to finish. He did a really great job of keeping composure and getting that fight to the range that favored him. And did a great job of fighting against a guy in Damian Stasiak who has a really dangerous ground game, a bottom game. He cut through his guard. He stayed heavy on top of him. That being said, I think he's definitely against a finisher here. This may not be Sam Cecilia, may not be Chad Mendez, but he's got a heavy right hand. He's a solid wrestler. He's good enough on the ground and knows enough to get back to his feet where it favors him. And I think that Meza is just still entirely too hittable. And his lack of a real strength really hurts him here against a guy who definitely knows what he wants to do every time out. So I got to favor Cecilia, and probably by knockout.
And Zane, your take?
Yeah, Cecilia. Meza he still relies on people to engage with him on the ground to really get into that grappling battle where Meza can actually then out-scramble and out-wrestle people. Cecilia's not going to do that. So this is a great stylistic matchup for Cecilia.
All right, and he is favored as well, minus 157 to minus 170, and Mates is the underdog at plus 135 to plus 143, and that brings us to the main card, which opens with welterweights Alan Jouban versus Matt Dwyer. And Zane, it's your turn.
All right, I like this fight. This is a good action fight. It's a good. I'm basically a lot more sold on Jouban than I am on Dwyer right now. My read on Dwyer regionally when he came to the UFC was that he was a big, tough fighter with very little technique. And, then he came in and got KO'd by Albert Tumanov. He did look better against Macario, but I also think that, Macario is somebody who is sort of slowly disappointing and regressing. And I'm not sure that he, that was so much that he was way better is that he was able to stay at range with somebody and just unload on them and use that athleticism and range. Jouban, somebody I think is a lot more likely to close him down. And while Dwyer likes to fight in the clinch, I think Jouban's better there. So I got to take Jouban.
And Connor?
Yeah, offensively speaking, we have two pretty similar guys here. Dwyer's got some sneaky potency in his punches. For his build, you would not expect him to crack the way that he can, but if he gets those hands on your chin, he is very effective. I think his technique is improving. That fight with Macario, he seemed to have a game plan in mind, and he stuck to it. He moved better than he used to. He landed punches better than he used to. He kind of resisted his urge to brawl. Jouban is kind of similar, but the big difference to me in this fight is that unlike past Dwyer opponents, I think Joban is actually very good at closing the distance and landing combinations. He's a pretty natural striker. And the big difference here is durability. I know that Joban can take a shot, and I know he's not that easy to hit. And Dwyer is not only incredibly hittable, but he tends to get hurt when he gets hit, and Joban really has some power in his hands, and his kicks, and his elbows, and his knees. So I just think he's an all-around a little too dangerous for Dwyer at this point in his career, and he probably will stop him in this fight.
All right, and Joban is favored pretty heavily, minus 410 all the way up to minus 500, and Dwyer is the dog at plus 310 all the way up to plus 365, and that brings us to Kevin Lee and James Muntasari at lightweight. And Connor, you go first.
Got to go with Kevin Lee as just the more consistent technician. Muntasari, he has some really impressive dynamic skills, but much like Paddy Houlihan, it's like that's all he has. Why do I bring up Paddy Houlihan so friggin' much on the vivisections?
He's an archetype. He's like a great example of
it's him, the first guy that comes to mind.
And a few other guys. They're like this sort of baseline, dynamic, and then meh.
Or like Chris Beal.
Like
big things, and I definitely Muntasari can do that, like flying knees, leaping lead uppercuts, spinning wheel kicks, like all this stuff. But then, like, where's Muntasari's jab? Where's his stance? Where's his footwork? Like, basic fundamentals aren't there. He's just kind of learning moves that he thinks are cool. And Kevin Lee, since moving to Extreme Couture, seems to have really been made to focus on techniques that work consistently. So I've, that plus the wrestling, which did give Muntasari a little bit of trouble against Joe Ellenberger, and Lee is a very capable wrestler. You have to go with Lee here.
And Jane?
Yeah, Muntasari's got, this is a classic puncher's chance fight. Muntasari is a great athlete. He's a big hitter. He's got the type of weird techniques that guys are just gonna, they're gonna move their hands in totally the wrong direction and get caught with a head kick. But you can't bet on that. You can't say, oh yeah, well, he's gonna hit that wheel kick and knock him out, unless it's Ellenberger versus
Wonderboy Thompson.
Wonderboy Thompson. That was actually predictable, but otherwise, Kevin Lee is just becoming a really solid fundamental wrestle boxer, and he's a great athlete. It's not like Muntasari's a better athlete than Kevin Lee, so I got to take Lee here.
All right, and Lee is favored minus 254 to minus 270, minus 241 to 270, and Montessori is underdog at plus 200 all the way up to plus 226. And that brings us to Manny Gamburian and Scott Jorgensen, and they are fighting at bantamweight. Thoughts on this, Zane?
Man, this is one of those fights that, this will probably actually be a really fun competitive fight, and it's not a fight that on paper I want to see at all, but in the cage...
4 or 5 years ago would have been a humdinger.
Well, the thing is, they're on the same track. It would have been probably the same fight 4 or 5 years ago as it will be right now.
Except it would have mattered.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, neither of these guys have won consistently enough over the past 4 years to be, anywhere near top of the division. But the big thing is that over the past few years, Jorgensen, the guys that he's beating are all marginal, barely UFC talents, and the guys that Gamburian's beating are guys like Cole Miller and Michihiro Magawa and Cody Gibson even, and they're just a little bit of a cut above. I just think that Gamburian's got some more left in the tank, and plus, you've basically got a bigger fighter moving down to fight a smaller fighter moving up, and at this point, I just think that Gamburian's going to be more powerful and just better.
Let's see. Unless his arm falls out of the socket again. Connor, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a fight that is. This is kind of like Kawajiri. What was Kawajiri's last fight?
Kawajiri Seaver.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fight that you for the past 5 years, if you'd heard that this fight was coming, you'd be like, oh, that's a good fight, and it's still there, but it's both guys are just a little less.
Yeah.
The reason I have to go with Gamburian is because I think Jorgensen is considerably less than Gamburian at this point. We've still seen, even in losses, some consistency out of Gamburian. He still has an idea of what he wants to do. And Jorgensen just really seems to struggle, even in the phases that used to favor him. Even in the scrambles that used to be such a strength of his, he's now finding himself ending out on bottom or in a dangerous position or in submissions and on the feet he's getting hit all over the place. I know Gambarian's not much of a great striker, but I've just seen Jorgensen getting hit by people that a couple years ago wouldn't have been hitting him that easily. He's always been hittable, but now he's hurtable too. So I have to go with Gambarian.
All right, and the odds makers like Gambarian as well. They've got him favored at -144 to -160. Not a huge spread with Jorgensen as the underdog at +120 all the way up to +135. And that brings us to Holly Holm and Marion Renault at women's bantamweight. A fight, Holly Holm at one point had a lot of hype behind her, not so impressive in a UFC debut. Here she goes. Connor, what do you think of this matchup?
I don't know what people expected from Holly Holm. You hear that somebody's
vicious knockoutery.
Well, I mean, if you ever looked at her boxing record, not only did she not face much incredible competition, if any, in fact, she went 1-1 with the best competition she ever faced. She was never ever a knockout artist, and that's not because she was facing great defensive fighters. Even when she was hitting people, she just does not carry power in her hands. She could if she learned to punch a little better, but she doesn't know how to sit down in her punches. She doesn't know how to plant her feet. She's an arm puncher through and through, and she moves a lot, and she punches with her arms. That's basically what she does. I kind of think that Marion Renault might be a competitive matchup for her here. Renault's not a bad boxer herself by MMA standards. She has an idea of what she wants to do. She moves pretty well. She doesn't fall into the pocket and stay there. She fights behind a jab, and she's got a good right hand. She hits pretty hard. I'd feel better picking her if I knew that she had any kind of wrestling game to really get this fight to the floor if she needed to. As it is, it's kind of like she can catch you in a submission if you follow her, but I don't really think Holly Holm will follow her if she ends up going to the ground. I also don't know that she'll go to the ground at all because it's not like Holly's going to knock her down. So, unless she clips her with one of those head kicks, which really Holly Holm is known as a boxer, but it's the kicks that have really been effective for her since she came to MMA. Man, that fight with Rocky Pennington was way too close. You know what I mean? And Pennington is not consistent. Like, she does not throw volume. She's hittable. She has not come into her own yet as a fighter. And Holm is supposed to be here already, and it was really close. I think I'm going to go with Renault. I don't feel confident in it, but I don't know. I think Renault's been surging, and Holm has just been flatlining. So I'm going to go with Marion.
I like that pick because Renault is a hurtful lady, and she's had some good upsets. When she came in, I thought she was too old to really make that big an impact, but so far she's been pretty impressive. And Zane, you going to get on the underdog parade?
I am actually. Yeah, I was all. Connor was like, it sounded like he was going for Holm. He was leading himself down that road, and then he just switched it up on me, and I'm like, damn it, I was supposed to be the opposition here. But yeah, I don't know. Like, for part of it's just a gut feeling that Renault's going to play spoiler, and part of it too is I kind of wish the UFC hadn't made this fight because I feel like these are two of the only women who have like a chance of climbing the ranks. Because Renault is one of the very, very few like elite level athletes that the UFC has picked up who can make a run to the top of the division. And Holm is one of the few like elite technicians that they've picked up who can make a run to the top of the division. Everybody else they're getting is kind of like the mediocre athlete with really raw skills. It's the Sarah Morris versus Jessica Andrade fight we saw below. And so I feel like you're going to lose one potential title challenger, especially with Renault, who just does not have probably all that much time. Like, she's kind of in a has to win now or never. And I don't know. I just think, there were even some moments, I believe, were there moments in that Holm fight where she took Pennington down? I feel like, or am I imagining that?
Maybe. I don't recall.
Anyway, whatever. The feeling with the Pennington fight was, Pennington was big and tough and mediocre, and Holm just, because she couldn't hurt her, she couldn't really ever put any sort of, she couldn't get any confidence and build any
Well,
consistency in the fight.
and in MMA, Holmes only ever really hurt people who are afraid of her. Like
Yeah.
if they're like backing off and like, oh, I don't want to get hit. Like Pennington took some shots and she was like, that wasn't so bad, So she just kept coming.
Yeah, Pennington's kind of like, I think of her as like the woman's bantamweight Cathal Pendred, like, you know.
Yep. So
And I don't know. My big question for Renault is she does not take punches that well, and she can get hit. Like Andrade did hurt her and drop her, and then just kept following her to the ground over and over and over again. But Andrade packs a bit more of a punch in her hands too, and so I'm feeling Renault here just in this sort of like gut upset thing. Like the home hype, the home train just feels like much more likely to get derailed, and this could be the sneaky fight to do it. And I could see Renault getting a submission. I could see Home like wanting to change things up and show off her wrestling a little and kickboxing and being like, here, and I'll hit this takedown too, and then falling right into a triangle.
That seems very much like a Jackson Winklejohn thing to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm
picturing. Big Jackson Winklejohn fan. All right, so the odds makers though, they like Holly Holm, so this might be an betting opportunity. Minus 195 all the way to minus 210, and Renault is the underdog at plus 160 all the way up to plus 180, and that brings us to the co-main event: Josh Thompson versus Tony Ferguson at lightweight. And Zane, you can talk first.
All right, this is a really tough fight to pick and a great crossroads fight. I love fights like this where you've got, Josh Thompson being the longtime vet and who's like just barely starting to lose a step. And it's the step where now when he's facing top level competition, he's losing the close fights. You can say, well, he lost to Gilbert Melendez and Kawajiri in the past, but it's sort of losing to Bobby Green and things like that. He beat Gilbert Melendez at one point, and now it's sort of like he's just not quite the same action fighter. Like, he's still a very good technician everywhere, but he has even less output than ever. And it means, he's more content to, like, has a little bit of the Uriah Hall syndrome where he's willing to coast out rounds he's losing. And Ferguson, on the other hand, is, a fighter that I kind of underrated for a while. But he's the young talent who's hitting his prime right now and who's really finding his stride. Not even that young, he's 31, but young enough in the sport, hitting his 6th or 7th year in the sport, really hitting his prime, hitting his stride. And in fights like this, I've always got to pick the guy on the rise, the guy who's in his prime and who should be winning these kinds of fights right now if everything is really clicked in his game. And I kind of feel like it has. I mean, Ferguson put a beating on Gleison Tebow, just absolutely one-sided beating, and that suggests to me that things really are clicking for Ferguson, and he is getting into that elite talent mode where I don't know how long he'll stay there. I don't know how high he'll rise. I don't know if he'll ever be a title challenger, but we're talking about somebody who could be a legit top 10 talent for a couple of years, and I think Thompson's on his way of falling out of that range. So I got to take Tony Ferguson, but I think it'll be a decision, because I don't see him submitting Thompson.
And Connor, your thoughts?
Yeah, Ferguson's quietly been improving in basically every aspect of his game, and that's what I really like about watching him fight. He's not only becoming a better boxer technically and defensively and offensively, he's actually a sneakily good defensive fighter on the feet. Probably because he's been trying to use head movement and footwork for himself, even when it wasn't working. Like, he was determined to learn how to do it right, despite some early setbacks. And now he does it pretty well. And he moves his feet well. He finds angles, and his power is really underrated, I think. Ferguson really does. When he sneaks into punch, it really rattles opponents. A lot of the times that he's finished guys by submission is because he's hurt them badly on the feet first. And that was, did he finish? He submitted Tebow. That's how that one was. He's very much like
hurt him and then submitted him.
Yeah, like a Donald Cerrone or a Carlos Condit kind of thing. He'll jump on that submission and finish the guy once he's got him hurt, and that's when, because he knows he's got great faith in his submission skills. If he can get it locked up tight while they're distracted by the punches, then it's pretty much over.
Yeah.
And I don't really have faith that Josh Thompson can cover the distance to get at Tony Ferguson without eating some pretty heavy leather along the way. I just, with lacking the kind of output that he has, he could turn into performance like he did against Nate Diaz, but I really think that fight is seeming more and more like it was his swan song, like it was his last really great performance. And since then, it's just kind of been meandering around and just giving away rounds, and I think that's more dangerous against Ferguson than it is against most. I would not be surprised if Ferguson finished him. Submission skills alone, it's not a big shot, but with that punching power and the boxing ability, Ferguson could plant a three-punch combination on his chin and fall him to the ground and finish it there. So I have to go with Tony Ferguson, and it could be a sad one for Josh Thompson fans.
That it could. And Thompson's had so many injuries over the years, and I think they're really starting to pile up. And I think the Diaz fight was one. Diaz had a style you could decode, and Thompson did an excellent job of decoding. I think Ferguson has a much more conventional high percentage style that's got fewer glaring weaknesses.
Plus, he's a good wrestler too. He can compete with Thompson's wrestling. His wrestling gets underrated.
If you look at like this triangle of Josh Thompson, Nate Diaz, and Gray Maynard, you're talking about fighters who are all on a slide together. And so seeing one of them get a win over the other one, it's like, well, yeah, that's meaningful. But then we also saw like Nate Diaz just totally didn't even show up for that Rafael dos Anjos fight. And Gray Maynard has been getting beat by everyone now. And so it's just like, well, how much stock do you really put in that, Yeah.
So anyway, Ferguson's favored, not enormously, but minus 183 to minus 200. Josh Thompson's the underdog at plus 155 all the way up to plus 169. That brings us to headliner heavyweights, Frank Mir and Todd Duffee. This is a fun one for me. I mean, Mir may or may not be shot. Duffee may or may not ever add up to much, but it could be some fun violence. Zane, your thoughts?
May or may not be. I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Overweight guys huffing and puffing around the cage as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was talking about with like guys on a slide together, where Frank Mir beating Bigfoot Silva. That's his only win since 2011. And
wasn't Crow Cop his previous win before that? I mean,
no, Nogueira. He out-grappled him.
Yeah. Okay,
caught him in that nasty sub.
But also basically a shot fighter.
Yeah. So his own, and then so he has, since 2011, he's lost 4, won his last fight against Antonio Silva, who is just a shade of himself at this point.
Without TRT, and I think that's a factor with Duffee as well.
Yeah. I don't know if it is with Duffee. I mean, the one way that I think that could be a factor with Duffee is that this is a guy who, before his long layoff due to that
rare nerve
system he had, Parsonage Turner syndrome, he was fighting in the heavyweight division at about 237 pounds. He came back and he was like 220, 225, and that's like the smallest heavyweight in the division, essentially, is Todd Duffee, or close to it, There are a couple other guys who fight right around there, but you're talking a really small heavyweight at this point. I don't think that's going to cost him up against Frank Mir. Frankly, I don't see any. The only thing I could see for Frank Mir is Duffee hurts him, follows him to the ground, and gets submitted, falls straight into an armbar. But no matter what, I think this fight involves Todd Duffee hurting Frank Mir badly. I don't think there's any way this fight goes that it does not go with Todd Duffee hurts Frank Mir. And at that point, I gotta be scoring this for Todd Duffee.
And Connor, your thoughts?
I see it as a little closer, and kind of for weird reasons. Frank, I have never ever been able to get a read on Frank Mir. Every time I think that he's done and he's on a slide, I think the thing is that Frank Mir really vacillates between caring about fighting and not caring about fighting. He's always fighting. He fights a lot, but he really goes back and forth between being fired up, getting good training partners, really putting a lot of effort into his camp and trying to improve, which is what I think he did for the Bigfoot fight. And and then other times just kind of like hanging out with his kids and just kind of putting in. He runs his own camp, so it really is up to his whims how well prepared he is for a fight. The reason I kind of think he might be dangerous here is that I think he might be kind of riding not complacency but kind of a surge of reinvigorated interest after that performance against Bigfoot. It's hard to take that Bigfoot fight really seriously because of how physically depleted Bigfoot has been, and so even a potentially very physically depleted Frank Mir could look good against him. But taking that into account, Mir did look very good. He looked very quick on his feet. He was throwing good punches. His boxing looked about as good as it ever has, and he's always had underrated punching power on the feet. And decent defense. He's never been that easy to put away. It's only been guys like Shane Carwin, Junior Dos Santos. I mean, Alistair Overeem didn't go for the kill, but he also didn't put Frank Mir away. He did completely dominate him, though. So, then again, Todd Duffee's not the grappler that Alistair Overeem is. So if he ends up on top of Frank Mir, he's not going to, be able to play around in half guard and beat him up with elbows that way. So, I feel compelled to pick Todd Duffee because it feels stupid to pick Frank Mir, but there's been a lot of times where it would have been stupid to pick Frank Mir where he won anyway, like knocking out Czech Congo or submitting Big Nog or knocking out.
That was exactly the fight I was thinking of because Mir surprised Congo with a nice combination at the beginning, came out real aggressive with good footwork and bombed him with a combo. And Duffee is not he's a guy who's known for his hands, but he's not a guy who's a skilled kickboxer.
No, not really, and he's definitely not defensively savvy. Like, he's hittable. Anybody who wants to, and he's kind of stiff with his boxing. Even when he was fighting Mike Russo, he didn't land as many punches as Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg would have had you think. Like, Mike Russo was just kind of swaying back and forth and getting out of the way because you can kind of tell what Todd Duffee wants to do. So, I don't know. I got to pick Todd Duffee, but a Frank Mir win wouldn't really surprise me.
Connor, come on.
No, a Frank Mir win wouldn't shock me, but I can't. It's too stupid to pick Frank Mir. I can't do it.
I'm tempted. That tempts me, but I'm gonna have to go with that.
I hope he wins. It would be awesome if he won.
The thing with Duffee is that he's so much faster than 95% of that division. That's the thing that I think you have to remember with him is even if you're his mechanically he's not that great, his technically, all these things, he is super fast for that division.
Very true, very true. And so the odds makers like Duffee as well. They've got him favored -184 to -190, and Mir's underdog at +150 to +169. And that brings us to UFC Fight Night Glasgow. The torture never stops. We've got two portions of the card on Fox Sports 1 and two fights on UFC Fight Pass. And this is, again, starting Saturday morning American time. First up, heavyweights, Daniel Omielanczak versus Chris De La Rocca. And Zane, you can go first.
All right. This is if this were anything other than heavyweight, Chris De La Rocca probably wouldn't have a prayer. But this is heavyweight, and so a 33-year-old or 35-year-old who has 3 pro fights against a 32-year-old with 23 pro fights actually has a chance. De La Rocca is a good athlete. He actually has shown that he's learning some good striking fundamentals, not great ones, but for heavyweight, he's a willing brawler. And he's big, really big for heavyweight, and in shape. Omielanczak is not big, not notably in shape, but is a much more technical kickboxer without a lot of other dimension to his game. And so Omielanczak should win this. He's not fighting on short notice. He's not fighting somebody with experience. He's not fighting somebody with a deep technical game, but I would be 0% surprised if Chris De La Rocca won it.
All right, Connor, your take?
It's heavyweight, so it could happen. I mean, Omielanczak was not supposed to lose to Anthony Hamilton.
No.
You know what I mean? That shouldn't have happened. And he was he had no idea how to deal with just the most basic of MMA games in that fight. Anthony Hamilton is not, and no disrespect meant to him, but he's not special as a fighter in any way. He just does it's like he learned to fight reading like a MMA how to fight MMA handbook. You know what I mean, for beginners. That's
He's
what
been
he
coming
does.
over here and borrowing my victory belt books.
Yeah, pretty much. So, and Omi Alanchuk was like baffled by it. That was really hard to watch. I'm picking Omi Alanchuk, but I picked him confidently last time, and I don't feel inclined to make that mistake again. So I will pick him tentatively.
And as few sites are given odds on this fight as there are, Olamanchuk is favored minus 133 to minus 140, minus 155. And De La Roca is the underdog at plus 115 to plus 121. And that brings us to Marcus Brimage and Jimmy Rivera at bantamweight. And Connor, you can talk first.
Which one are we on?
Rivera, Brimage.
Bantamweight's Brimage versus Rivera.
I don't know, man. How do I know where Marcus Brimage is at right now? You know, maybe it's not so much that Brimage is.
He's on Fight Pass in Glasgow. That's where he's at. That tells you a lot.
You know, maybe it's not that Brimage is inconsistent so much as his opponents are like inconsistently able to deal with him. Like when his opponent can't figure him out, he looks pretty solid. And then when his opponent is able to like out physical him, or is just more dynamic, more explosive, he starts to struggle. Like as a workman-like fighter, he seems to have a good idea of what he's doing.
If I was Brimage's manager, I'd have him calling out tough Latin America and tough China veterans all day long.
Oh, he should, absolutely. I don't know why these fighters don't do that. Like, managers don't really seem to push for favorable matchups for their fighters to, like, build their confidence and let them get some work in, and Brimage needs that. I think I'll pick him over Rivera. I think I'll pick him over Rivera, mostly because Rivera is not a big finisher, and against those kind of guys, Brimage tends to look pretty solid. But, I've already talked too much about this fight, but...
Yeah, Zane, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I think the thing with Brimage is that it's just taken him a long time to figure out what he is as a fighter, and what he is a decent kickboxer and a good athlete. And it's like taken him like 7 years to get there. Like what I said about the Garbrandt Brimage fight was that like they were at the same level, but it took Garbrandt 3 years and Brimage 7, and it was a really close fight. And Garbrandt still won it, but Rivera is good. He's a great prospect. I think we're going to see a lot more finishes out of him as his boxing has improved a lot lately. But I don't know, like Brimage, Rivera's not a great wrestler, and he's not a bad one, but he's not like, that's not his go-to. He doesn't wrestle unless he has to. So this is pretty much going to be a striking match, and on short notice, I think Brimage is much more prepared at this point.
All right, and the odds makers, however, like Rivera, they've got him favored at minus 116 to minus 140, and Brimage is the dog at plus 100 all the way up to plus 106. And that brings to the Fox Sports 1 prelims, Robert Whiteford and Paul Redmond at featherweight. Zane, your turn.
Redmond and Whiteford, this is tough because both these guys, I don't know. Like I kind of like parts of Whiteford's game. I think he's interesting as sort of a judoka and a decent athlete with a limited power striking game. But Redmond's actually got like a pretty good skill set. He's not the best athlete, but he's got a good sort of consistent wrestle boxing game, even on the UK circuit. Bektic took him apart, but Bektic, and that was on short notice, and Bektic is a world-class, like, we're talking top 5 future title contender. And Whiteford isn't. So I think Redmond's got a much more consistent, trustable game, or Redmond has a much more consistent, trustable game than Whiteford. And I gotta pick Redmond to win this.
And Connor, your thoughts?
I'm gonna go with Whiteford. I think I tend to favor like the stout, powerful fighter who can work in the clinch in these kind of matchups against the guy who's happy to grapple from his back and goes for high risk, low percentage submissions like Redmond does. Redmond's about as close as you get to actually being an effective leg lock specialist in MMA. He does it well. You disagree, Zane?
Oh, I think his game is a lot more evolved than that. He's become a pretty good pocket boxer. He tends to go for submissions when somebody else like gets him down or forces out a grappling exchange. Then he goes for like, crafty shit.
Yeah,
He's
and
not
that's
like Whistle, who's like a dive on your leg.
that's true. That's true. I just think Whiteford's not like immensely powerful, but he takes a shot really well. He's happy to mix it up in the pocket. He's difficult to get to the ground. Redmond's obviously got an advantage if it does go there, but I don't know. I just feel Whiteford here.
And the odds are like Whiteford too. They've got it favored at -140 all the way up to -160. Paul Redmond +125 all the way up to +127. And that brings us to Michael Lahoot and Timu Pakalin at lightweight. And Connor, it's your turn.
Michael Lahoot. Is it Laboot? He's not fighting Jake Matthews anymore?
Nope. Matthews got injured.
Pakalin.
Well, I didn't even know about this. Zane, you go first.
Okay. These guys are really similar. They're both decent but not great strikers with better offense than defense. Good offensive wrestlers. Good. Packlin's a better offensive grappler. Laboot is a very good defensive grappler. You're really talking about a coin flip fight, honestly. I'm going to take Laboot because he didn't come in on short notice.
Yeah, I really wish we were still seeing Laboot versus Matthews because I was looking forward to that, and I thought that Laboot would have had a good shot in that fight against Laboot. Am I mistaken in thinking that Laboot should have won his last fight?
He probably should have. It was very close, at least.
I mean, he pretty much got robbed against a Sergio Moraes who did nothing but wing giant punches and miss. Laboot's pretty capable as a fighter off the back foot. He moves well. He's got a good jab. And yeah, he's a good counter wrestler. Unfortunately, I don't have a super good read on Pakalin, but I've got to pick him over him just based on the short notice, and that I know Laboot's a consistent, effective fighter. So.
All right, Pakalin is favored, which is surprising for a short notice guy, -116 and -134, and Laboot is the underdog at +100 to +106, and that brings us to Hans Stringer versus Ilir Latifi at light heavyweight. And you guys messed me up with Connor ducking the pick, but Zane, I believe it's your turn.
All right, man. This is the indictment on Ilir Latifi if he loses this fight, because Hans Stringer, he's been training with the Black Zillions. Yeah, he's only 28, but has had like 30 pro fights and 22 wins. But he is not good. He is slow and hittable, and he doesn't wrestle, and he
I'd like to see you get in the
grapple.
cage with him, Simon. I'd like to see you step up. Okay.
Hey, you know what?
Somewhere a fighter just ripped the mic headset right off his head and
That's true. Somebody's going to challenge me to a fight, and I'll challenge somebody to an essay writing contest, and we'll. I mean,
exactly.
Like, Hans Stringer is just. He's a guy that he's just not a good enough athlete. That's the thing, is he's so slow and so hittable, and his game has not evolved because of it. And Ilir Latifi may also not have evolved, but he's still a powerhouse. And I don't know. Like, I gotta assume that he does not get overwhelmed like he did against Blachowicz. Because he's facing somebody that he should just be able to beast around the cage. And if he can't, that's an ultimate indictment on Ilir Latifi not having nearly enough depth to his game to beat anyone consistently.
And Connor?
Do you think you could beat Hans Stringer in a spelling bee, Zane?
I don't know. If it's in Dutch, no.
I just want to recall to everyone's memory Hans Stringer versus Francimar Barroso as being one of the worst, dullest, most grindiest fights I ever witnessed, and almost to the point where it crosses over to becoming hilariously enjoyable, which was kind of like watching Pendra getting beat by John Howard. I got to take credit for thinking he could win that fight. Boy, it was a fun fight to watch. Yeah, I mean, Ilir Latifi, for all of his flaws, Jan Blachowicz is fast and he's a sharpshooter. He's accurate, and it was a mistake for Latifi to try striking with him as long as he did. Latifi could probably strike with Hans Stringer all day and not face the same kind of punishment because Stringer is slow, he doesn't cover distance that well, and Latifi has the explosiveness both in the grappling and in the striking to compete with a guy who may technically be a better striker than him. If Latifi loses this, it says a lot about his ceiling. In fact, it lowers where I think most of us expect it to be considerably. But I do think he should win.
And he's favored minus 213 all the way up to minus 260, and Hans Stringer is the underdog, plus 180 to plus 192. And that brings us to the archetypal Paddy Holohan versus Von Lee, headlining the Fox Sports 1 prelims at flyweight. And Connor, this is your fight to talk about.
Paddy Holohan. The best thing you could say about Paddy Holohan is that he's fun to watch him fight, but not necessarily because I think he's a little in love with the idea of being fun to watch fight. You know what the crazy thing about the SBG Ireland guys is that aside from Conor McGregor, they all fight exactly the same, regardless of whether or not it suits their style. Like Cathal Pendred strikes like Paddy Holohan, but 100 times slower, and Paddy Holohan charges into clinches like Cathal Pendred without being like a big, strong grappler. Like they all just do this weird kind of these large movements, these big strikes, just trying to. It's almost like Winklejohn's fighters. The same complaint I often have about them. It's like, oh, the unpredictability relies on the opponent waiting to see what they do next. Like they're not forcing the opponent to guess what's coming. They're like, okay, I'm going to throw a big left round kick, and then I'm going to dance for a few minutes. I'm going to throw another left round kick, and then I'll throw a wheel kick, and maybe he won't see it coming because it's different than what I did before. But it doesn't it's not, I don't know. It's not these forced setups that good fighters tend to rely on. He can probably do that against Von Lee. Probably. Yeah, I mean, Von Lee is not physically imposing and tends to get outworked by guys who do have that dynamism. And while Holohan isn't like a powerhouse, he definitely, I think he's more athletic than Lee. I'll pick Holohan.
All right, and Zane, your pick?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a weird fight. Von Lee is a really weird fighter. That's the thing. Is because, especially you watch his fight against Nam Phan, and obviously that, Nam Phan was, even when we thought Nam Phan was bad, I don't think we thought Nam Phan was as bad as he ended up being, which is weird because he's now, a Pancrase champ. Like, he went straight over to Japan and won a title. But Von Lee has the ability to just, he's known as, a technical marvel in the gym. He's one of those guys, he's kind of like Mike Pyle, where people are just like, oh, this dude's a monster in the gym. And then in the cage, when he wins, he looks fantastic. He can be a great dynamic grappler, he's got some good wrestling, he's got really slick footwork and some good boxing. But there's not a lot, there's no power in his boxing, and so he's really relying on having slick footwork for his whole fight. And against somebody like Iri Alcantara, he didn't even get 30 seconds to work that before he got hit with one big shot and put down. Now, I don't think Holohan has that kind of power at all. He's dynamic, but he's not really powerful. So, I don't know. Can Lee just outwork him for 15 minutes? Maybe, probably, maybe not. I'm gonna go with Holohan to take a weird upset, scramble-filled win and be a little more. I don't know. Actually, I'll take Lee. What the shit? I don't care. This is a weird fight, and I'll take Lee because I like him.
It should be fun, at least.
Yeah.
It should be interesting, and Holohan is actually the favorite, minus 179 to minus 195, and Lee is the underdog at plus 150 to plus 161. And that brings us to Leonardo Mafra and Stevie Ray at lightweight, opening up the main Fox Sports 1 card. And Zane, you can talk about this one first.
This is a great fight. This is a lot of fun. This is a fight that I think people probably are not that interested in. That's going to be a really great fight because both these guys are great physical talents with really limited action games. You know, they're not the kind of guys who, like, Leonardo Mafra's not going to be hitting any takedowns on anyone or trying to out-grapple anyone. He's a pure shoot-a-box, modern shoot-a-box Muay Thai brawler. And Stevie Ray's got a more nuanced game. He can wrestle pretty well. He can grapple a bit, and he's got really heavy hands. These guys do. And I gotta trust Stevie Ray's game a little more, though. I think he could easily get hurt early by Mafra. I don't know that he's ready for Mafra's combination of speed and power. Mafra's certainly going to be the faster fighter. But I think at that point, Ray can turn to his wrestling, get a takedown, and then he's just got huge ground and pound, really powerful strikes from top. And I'll take Ray for the more complete game, but this should be a fun, powerful fight.
And Connor?
I'm not sure whether I have faith in Ray to get Mafra to the ground. I gotta say, I like what they're doing at the new Shoot-a-Bucks.
Yeah.
They're like just overwhelming fighters, and with some a penchant to be pretty technical too. Tomas Almeida couldn't overwhelm Brad Pickett last weekend, and so he took it to him and used some clever setups and got him out of there. And Mafra is very much the same. I don't think he's not quite the blue chip prospect that Almeida is, but he's definitely got potential. He's definitely hits hard. He's a solid grappler with solid defensive wrestling too. Stevie Ray can compete with him on the feet, but I kind of see Ray just getting overwhelmed at the fence here, like Cain Carrizosa did when he fought Mafra. I just kind of see him getting pushed back and being too hittable. So we'll see. It should be an action fight regardless, and I definitely think Ray has a chance. And if he gets it to the ground, he is a pretty crushing top player. So tough call. I'm going to go with Mafra, but
might be an opportunity here if you leave our panel because Ray is favored not enormously, but minus 194 all the way up to minus 200, and Mafra is the underdog at plus 145 to plus 174. That brings us to Leon Edwards and Pavel Pavlik at welterweight. And Connor, you can go first.
I have no idea what to make of Pavel Pavlik. I think the biggest thing I can say about him is that he just kind of does what his opponent wants to do all the time. He never really makes his own fight happen, and it kind of leads me to believe that he doesn't have his own fight. He showed some nice ferocity in his last fight against Sheldon Westcott. Westcott completely controlled him with the grappling, and Pavlik, like I said, he just kind of took it. He just agreed to clinch fight with him, but then he did find the openings in that phase. He's not bad at finding ways to exploit the fight he ends up in, but he's going to end up in that fight. And Leon Edwards is not a good guy to agree to fight his fight with. You don't want to agree to stand at range and box with Leon Edwards. And if my read is correct and Pavlik does that, he's probably going to get knocked out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the big thing we saw with the Westcott fight is that Westcott is a guy who can't maintain his own style of fighting.
Mm-hmm.
He makes himself tired fighting his own fight. And that kind of is what happened with Pavlik. He was pretty much getting exactly the fight he wanted, and then he just got tired and Pavlik took over. But Edwards is pretty supremely good at the fight he wants. He lost to a very underrated tough fighter in Claudio Silva as a kind of a hulking, incredibly tough, incredibly durable guy that just makes people look ugly. But Edwards is a good power striker with great takedown defense. That's really something he does well. And so Pavlik's probably not going to get him down, and he's probably going to be forced to trade with him. And then, against better boxers, Edwards' lack of output might come up, but not here. Edwards is just going to, I think, first round KO. Probably.
And Edwards is favored appropriately minus 219 all the way up to minus 255, and Pavlik is the underdog at plus 195 all the way up to plus 217. And that brings us to Courtney Casey and Joanne Calderwood at women's strawweight. And Zane, you go first.
This is actually, I think, a good. This is a right fight for Joanne Calderwood right now because she raised a lot of questions, just getting totally beasted by Marina Moros, which is good for Moros, but that was like, the highlight performance of Moros' career right there. Um, and Calderwood, like, I don't know. I'm very divided on her. She is a good technical fighter in certain specific ranges. But I'm not sure that she's a good enough athlete to consistently win at a high level in women's strawweight. Even with her Muay Thai experience and Muay Thai titles, I think that that's a very different level. Like you can be a more it Muay Thai plays to being a more technical fighter and having a technical advantage rather than necessarily being like having supreme athleticism, if that makes sense. I mean, just like you can be, I don't know, like it's hard to put that into consistent. It's hard to not feel like I'm bullshitting that, but basically, I think better athletes can beat Joanne Calderwood. And, beating women like Sohee Ham and Katja Kankanpa, like, they're just not. Like, Sohee Ham's tiny, and Kankanpa is not a great athlete. She's really tough and really, hard nosed, but not like an athletic super talent. And I don't know about Courtney Casey Sanchez. What I've seen of her looks like she's a good athlete. She looks like she's got power. She looks like she's developing a basic MMA game, very, 1-2 striking to grappling, overly reliant on submission over position, not deep into her fundamentals yet. Calderwood should win this, especially on short notice. But this, she's got to answer the question of can she consistently face big, good athletes and not just get overwhelmed? So that's kind of what I'm looking for here.
And Connor, your pick?
I just want to point out to everybody that Courtney Casey's last fight on Sherdog is listed as TKO via knee to the groin.
I know.
Which was a very strange fart. A strange fight against Helen Harper. It was a strange fart. So I think that kind of says everything that you need to know about Courtney Casey, I guess. Weird things happen in her fights, and she could have a weird thing happen against Joanne Calderwood. She seems like the kind of fighter who could force that, especially if Calderwood has the same kind of mental issues that she seemed to have against Marina Moroz. Moroz showed that the boxing that she has purported to have for a long time is actually there, so it was a good showing from her.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a pretty bad showing from Joanne Calderwood. She was flinching from the opening bell. She looked like she didn't want to be there. Even before the fight, she looked already disheartened. And reportedly, she had some kind of issues in her personal life, some relationship issues or something that were maybe affecting her mentally going into the bout. So she should win this fight, but I don't really know what to expect given that last performance. Has she recovered? Has she not? And even on top form, she's not a flawless fighter. As Zane said, she struggles in some ranges. She's not a great defensive fighter ever on the feet. And a lot of the things she does well kind of leave her at risk for a good athlete to kind of power through her. She's going to stand with her feet really close to you and throw high knees. Well, if somebody tries to take you down, you can't really be surprised. So I'll pick Joanne Calderwood, but this fight is I pick her pretty confidently, but I say that this fight should be a good opportunity to see where she's really at and whether her ceiling has been reached or not.
All right, and Calderwood is pretty heavily favored for all the doubts you guys are voicing. Minus 337 to minus 407. Minus 442, actually. And Casey's the underdog at plus 290 all the way up to plus 299, so not a huge range. But this next one is the biggest betting spread we've seen on either card. Joseph Duffee versus Ivan George at lightweight. And Connor, you can talk first.
Joseph Duffee? I've thought Joseph Duffee has looked fantastic in his last few fights. I know he's now training at TriStar. He's turned an already capable boxing game into a really dangerous one. He's got the submission grappling and the wrestling to back it up. And Ivan George was decisioned by Rodrigo Dom in 2014. Like, I just don't see how he can really compete with. I just kind of think that Duffee outmatches him in every phase.
But he's a BJJ grappler with no takedown game and an unwillingness to grapple. Come on.
Zane, tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, Duffy's gonna walk through George here. This is an easy fight. Duffy by a mile.
All right, and the odds makers agree they've got Duffy heavily favored, minus 714 all the way up to minus 850, and George is an underdog at plus 359 all the way up to plus 587, and that brings us to Evan Dunham versus Ross Pearson at lightweight for the co-main event. And Zane, you can go first.
This is a fight that has me a little confused, honestly. I'm not sure where either of these fighters are. I think technically, Pearson had a fight in 2004, but he really started his career in earnest back in 2007. And same thing with Dunham. He started his career right at the same time. They're both, have been fighting for equally as long, and it's not so long that either guy should be shot, but they've both already kind of looked shot at points. Like, they both already kind of had performances where you're like, wow, you just got blown out of the water by somebody we expected you to compete with. Like, Al Iaquinta just pasted Ross Pearson. Wasn't even a close fight at any moment. And Evan Dunham, by similar tones, just got handled by Edson Barboza, and it's just it's not that these guys shouldn't be, it's not like they shouldn't be losing these fights, but it's just how heavily they're losing. And so when you put them together, I don't know, I have more faith in Ross Pearson's game. It seems like a more consistent, more reliable game, but Dunham looked good against Rodrigo Dom, and better than he has in a long time, and that makes me feel like he could take it. I mean, Pearson had a pretty easy time with Sam Stout, super easy time with Gray Maynard. Ryan Couture, he was hurt, still had an easy time with them. It's just I don't know. I'm gonna go with Pearson because I've always liked him, always had a soft spot for him, and I think his game's much more trustworthy. He's a little faster with what he does well. Dunham is good at being aggressive and tough, but he's not he's not a great athlete. And so I think that Pearson can sit in the pocket against him a little more and find his space, but I could see Dunham just pressing him constantly, getting in the clinch, making it dirty and ugly, and getting his fight and winning a decision. So I'm taking Pearson, but not confidently.
All right, Connor, your thoughts?
I really like this fight, and I kind of feel like both of these guys are at the same place. It's just that we've seen Evan Dunham stretch against top-tier fighters, and he has fallen short. And Ross Pearson got a little more time to kind of feast on fighters who were not top-tier, and then when he did, each time he went against them, he fell a little short. Like the Diego Sanchez fight, he looked good. Gray Maynard fight was competitive until he ended up putting his power on Maynard's chin. And then Iaquinta, who is on Edson Barboza levels of talent right now, of potential, just blew him out of the water, as Zane said. Whereas Dunham had a really, really tough schedule. He beat Rafael. Remember, a lot of people thought he beat Rafael dos Anjos when they fought, and that was right before dos Anjos took it to Donald Cerrone. So that was more or less the version of dos Anjos that we have come to know as lightweight champ. Dunham was competitive with him. He went the distance with TJ Grant right before Grant earned his shot at the title that never came. And then against Rodrigo Dom, he finally got to fight another fighter that was at his level or below, and he just completely wrecked him. He had his way with Rodrigo Dom. He outboxed him beautifully. So it leads me to believe that he might have a really good shot here against Ross Pearson. I think I'm going to pick Evan Dunham, to be honest. I think because he's such a pressuring fighter, and I think Pearson was more willing to fight off the back foot, that Dunham might be able to put hands on Pearson. And he's got a pretty overwhelming style, both in the clinch and with his boxing. Pearson's got good defense, but you force a guy to make all these defensive movements in a row, and each one becomes a little less sure than the last, and the guy throwing has a little easier time of finding his head with each punch. So if Denham can keep his combinations going and move forward, I think he's got a really realistic shot against Pearson here.
Interesting picks. And Dunham is the underdog, plus 150 to plus 178, and Pearson is favored minus 183 all the way up to minus 205. And that brings us to the headliner, Michael Bisping versus Thales Leites, one of the most exciting matchups of 2008, easily. What do you think, Connor?
You tend to reserve your most scathing sarcasm for decent fights, which is why I always laugh.
It's a decent fight. I'm just saying there was a time when both of these guys were really relevant. I mean, Leites actually is still, I think, even better than he was.
He's much better than he was.
And Bisping has kept himself going, but
I think Bisping's as good as he was. Honestly, I think Bisping has maintained remarkably well. He's just never transcended.
He's improved in skill. I think he's lost a little bit of his physicality and maybe a little bit of his chin, but
that may be.
Yeah, this is a good fight. This is easily the best fight on the card. Give us your thoughts.
Tough fight to call. At times, Leites looks very, very sharp on the feet now. And other times, when he fought Tim Boetsch, he's just I don't know if he maybe thought that he could have his way with Boetsch in that fight, and so he just tried to go ham and take him out of there. It kind of seemed like that's what he was doing, and then he was really caught off guard when Boetsch, unsurprisingly, tagged him and hit him with powerful punches in the pocket, which is what Tim Boetsch does. The other times when he has not tried to just run at people and destroy them, he's looked pretty sharp. He looked good against Tom Watson and Ed Herman. He did run at Francis Carmont and destroy him the same way he did Boetsch. So maybe the Boetsch fight was enough to convince him that's not a great idea. I don't think it's a great idea against Michael Bisping. Not that Bisping is going to knock him out with a counterpunch or anything, but Bisping kind of deals with guys who try to overwhelm him relatively well, especially now. I think he's kind of learned to do that a little better than he used to in the past. He keeps his range well. He moves pretty well. Then again, Bisping always has the same openings. He has had the same weaknesses in his defense for a decade, it seems. He's just been getting caught by the same things every time. If you push Bisping back out of range and wing a punch over the top as he retreats or pivots, you're going to catch him with his chin in the air standing up tall, every single time. Brian Stan did it. Kung Lee did it with his right hook. Obviously,
Holloway did it.
Henderson.
Yeah. Dalloway did it. Everybody does it. Bisping backs up and he gets clocked. And against Leites, who might be swinging wild in some of those exchanges, that's a very big risk. And then you take into account the wrestling and the submission grappling of Leites, and he starts to pose a really big threat. The biggest thing in Bisping's favor here is that it's a 5-round fight. And I think Bisping's longevity has been demonstrated so much recently because he's finally gotten the chance, despite never having gotten that title shot, to go into some 5-round fights. Now that they have 5-round main events, he doesn't have to be in a championship fight to go the distance. And when he gets the chance, we're starting to see a lot more finishes from him because a 3rd, 4th, 5th round, that attritive style of his really starts to wear on guys. So if he can weather the early storm from Leites, it's not unlikely that it could be a 4th or 5th round knockout. Leites has shown a tendency to gas, to waste his energy, and we know Bisping conserves his very well. So I'm going to pick Leites. I think he'll probably get Bisping out of there either with a knockout or submission early in the fight, but a Bisping decision or a late Bisping knockout, maybe knees in the clinch, which he's always had a propensity for, that wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I think especially just because Leites does charge into the pocket, throwing really hard, overhands and hooks. I think Bisping, especially early in fights, really handles that poorly. Especially early. The earlier in the fight it is, the less he's adjusted to it. He's just not ready. It's that kind of idea of it seems like at the beginning of every fight, he has to remember, oh wait, this is all the stuff I've been working on that I should be doing later on in the fight.
Yeah.
And some fighters are always like that. That's the classic starting slow. And Leites seems like he wants to just come out of the gate blitzing every time. And Bisping's not he's not some amazing dirty boxer. He's not Tim Boetsch. It's not like he's going to sit in the pocket and match you power for power. and scare you off. He will land some good counter shots and maybe enough to scare Leites off, and maybe Leites will be more, kind of pick your shots, be careful. But I think that would actually bode worse for Leites if he gave Bisping time to move and set up and fire his jab and get his game working. I think that would actually be worse for Leites. I think if he just goes in and tries to bully him, that would be best. I gotta pick Leites, but yeah, like Connor said, I wouldn't be surprised if Bisping could weather the storm and then come out and get a late finish. It's really all about how consistent Leites is at finding the Bisping's chin, or I don't know if he can get and keep Bisping down and submit him. That seems like a pretty tall order, but
yeah, and for as much flack as Bisping gets for being hittable, and it's well deserved, he is incredibly hittable, especially early in the fight. He is also incredibly hard to finish. It's only really like massive hitters that put him away with that shot that hurts him. It's Dan Henderson and Vitor Belfort. He gets hurt in most fights, but he doesn't get knocked out in most fights. So he recovers pretty well.
Yeah. So that's my big question: is does Leites actually have the consistency in his striking to finish Bisping? And if he doesn't, then I think Bisping wins a decision. So I don't know. That actually makes me kind of more likely to pick Bisping, because I don't know that Leites is that consistent. And
if he really if his best shot is to just go out and blow his wad early and it doesn't work, then you don't want to be gassed on the feet and unable to take down or grind out Michael Bisping. That's not
This is like Bisping took a round off Kennedy, and his fight with Chael Sonnen, people thought he won that. Maybe I don't even know that he did, but like that was
pretty much at least taken a round off of everybody he fights except for like the giant knockout punchers.
Yeah. So I don't know. I actually might pick. I'm gonna pick Bisping. Why not? I've talked myself into it.
It's a sensible pick, I think.
And the odds makers like Bisping as well, -105 to -145. And Leites, the odds are kind of all over the map. I'm seeing +100. I'm also seeing -121. So people, I don't know if people aren't betting on this fight yet, or if there's a lot of
pick'em fight to me.
It's a what?
It's a pick'em fight to me.
Yeah, quite possibly. I also think that you probably have a lot of British Islanders betting on Bisping at this point and pulling the odds in the direction. So that's our show. We got 2 UFC fight cards, and we'll be back next week. We'll also have the Care Don't Care preview tomorrow for both these fight cards. And then, Zane, what do we want to do with the 6th round? Do we want to do a Wednesday night 6th round?
I'm up for it if you are. If you're not, it's all about attitude. If you're not feeling it, I won't force you.
All right. Well, that's an excellent policy for everyone to follow. I think we'll just see how it goes. If Mir and Duffee is not just a horrible, depressing shit show, we'll have a 6th round. If not, we won't. So, onward and upward. Give us a like on YouTube. Subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube. Subscribe to MMA Nation on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter @KidNate, @TheZaneSimon, @BoxingBush, BUSCH, and read us at BloodyElbow.com. And adios, MMA aficionados, and thanks for watching. Thanks, fellas.